My name is Danielle Reyes, and I'm 34 years old. I've spent 9 years as a Child Protective Services caseworker for Alden County, which means I have read thousands of reports about neglect, and I know exactly what a false one looks like from the inside. I did not expect to become the subject of one myself. Not on a Tuesday. Not on the best professional morning of my life. At 8:40 a.m., my director called me into her office and told me I'd been promoted to Program Supervisor, the position I'd wanted since the day I started. I hugged her. I called my mother from the parking lot, still holding my visitor badge because I hadn't turned it in yet. My son Eli was 6 years old and waiting for me to pick him up from his after-school program at 5:15, the way I did every single day. At 5:20, 2 women I did not recognize were standing on my porch when I pulled into the driveway. One of them held a clipboard. The other held a badge from a county that was not mine. "Danielle Reyes?" the older one asked. "We're here regarding a report of child neglect involving your son." I have said those exact words to other parents more times than I can count. I have watched their faces do what my face did right then. The clipboard woman's name was Carol Ibarra. I would learn her name well over the following weeks, the way you learn the name of anyone who holds your child's future in a manila folder. I let them in. I know the protocol better than almost anyone in this state, and the protocol says you cooperate, you stay calm, you never give them a reason to write the word uncooperative in their notes. So I stood in my own kitchen, in the blazer I'd worn to accept a promotion 9 hours earlier, and I answered questions about whether my son was fed, whether he was supervised, whether there was, and I quote directly from the report Carol eventually let me see, a pattern of the mother prioritizing her career over the child's basic needs. The report had been filed at 9:02 a.m., 22 minutes after my promotion was announced. I want you to sit with that timing for a second, because I did. I sat with it for 3 days before I let myself say the sentence out loud. Someone knew. Someone knew exactly what time to make that call. Eli was in his room drawing a picture of a dinosaur wearing a birthday hat. He had no idea 2 strangers were standing in our living room discussing whether he was safe with me. That is the detail I keep returning to, not the accusation. Him, 6 years old, humming to himself, completely unaware that his mother's name had just been typed into a state database as a possible danger to him. Carol asked to see his room. I said yes, because saying no is the single worst thing you can do in this situation, and I know that better than anyone standing in that kitchen. She looked at his bed, made that morning. She looked at the refrigerator, stocked. She looked at the folder of his school attendance. Perfect. She wrote something down. I did not ask what. Before I tell you what happened when I finally saw the name on the referral source line, I need you to understand something about how these reports work. Most of them are anonymous by request, protected by law, permanently sealed from the parent under investigation. Most people never find out who reported them. I am not most people. I know which form unseals a referral source when the report is proven to be made in bad faith, and I already knew, standing in my kitchen, that I would be filing it. If you're watching this right now, tell me the time where you are, and tell me this. Have you ever had someone use your own child as a weapon against you? Keep that answer in your chest, because by the end of this story, you're going to need it. Carol asked me to sit down at my own kitchen table, and I did, because I have said that same instruction to parents on the worst afternoons of their lives, and I know what refusing it looks like on a report. She opened a folder. Not navy blue, like the one I would build later. Government gray, the kind with a case number stamped in the corner instead of a name. She read the allegation to me exactly as it had been submitted. The mother has been observed leaving the child for extended periods, prioritizing career advancement over the child's supervision and emotional needs. I asked her the question I ask every parent I investigate. Observed by whom? That information is protected at this stage, she said, and I nodded, because I have said those same 11 words to 100 people, and I never once, until that Tuesday, understood how much they cost the person hearing them. My hands were shaking by the time she left, not from fear of losing Eli. I knew, even then, in the part of my brain that had not caught up to the rest of me, that nothing in my home would justify a finding against me. The shaking came from somewhere else, from the 22 minutes. From the fact that whoever made that call had been waiting for a specific piece of good news to arrive before they picked up the phone. I called my sitter that night and asked her to stay an extra hour, not because I needed the hour, but because I needed to sit alone in my car in the driveway before I went inside and had to be someone's mother again. I sat there until 6:47, replaying the morning, the promotion, the hug, my mother's voice on the phone saying she was proud of me. None of it matched the woman standing in a gray blazer holding a clipboard 4 hours later. My brother's name is Thomas Reyes. He's 37. We grew up in the same house, ate at the same table, buried the same father 4 months before that Tuesday. I did not think, in the moment Carol Ibarra stood in my kitchen, that Thomas had anything to do with what was happening to me. I would be wrong about that within the week. Our father, Ernesto Reyes, died in February. He left behind a house in Millbrook worth around $410,000, a retirement account close to $190,000, and a life insurance policy that named my brother and me as equal beneficiaries. He also left behind a trust, because our father was careful that way, and the trust named an executor, me. Thomas had wanted that role. He asked our father for it twice while he was alive, once at a barbecue in 2022, once in the hospital 3 weeks before he passed. Our father told him no both times, gently but clearly, and told him the reason to my face during a visit I never repeated to Thomas. You spend money like it's already spent. Danielle counts it before she touches it. I did not gloat about that. I never told Thomas what our father said. I thought that silence was kindness. I understand now that it was a mistake, because Thomas built his own explanation for why he'd been passed over. And the explanation he built had nothing to do with money and everything to do with resentment he'd been carrying since we were teenagers. There were signs, if I'm honest, going back years. In 2019, Thomas told our mother, "I'd always acted better than everyone," a sentence she repeated to me almost verbatim, as if she agreed. In 2021, he skipped my graduation from my master's program in social work, then told relatives he'd had a work conflict, though I later found out he'd been at a concert 2 towns over. At our father's funeral, he gave a eulogy that mentioned me exactly once, to say I'd always been good at paperwork, a line that got an uncomfortable laugh from people who didn't understand what it cost me to hear it. I believed, for years, that Thomas's coldness toward me was just Thomas. A personality. A brother who wasn't close to his sister, the way plenty of siblings drift. That was my key mistake. I mistook a pattern for a personality, and I gave it 9 years of benefit of the doubt it never earned. The trust required a 6-month waiting period before final distribution, standard for an estate that size, and during that window, the executor has discretion over certain disbursements. I approved an early release of $12,000 to Thomas in March, for what he told me was a car repair. I did not require documentation. I trusted him, because he was my brother, and because our father had asked me, in one of his last clear conversations, to take care of Tommy, he's not as steady as you. I was taking care of Tommy. I did not know yet that taking care of him was the exact thing that made me dangerous to him. Here is what I missed. An executor can be removed for cause. One of the causes a court will consider is a finding, by any state agency, that the executor is unfit to manage responsibilities involving minors or dependents. A finding like the one an open CPS case can produce. A finding like the one Thomas needed, if he wanted to challenge me in probate court and argue that our father's trust should be reopened with a different, more stable family member in charge. I did not know any of this the week Carol Ibarra stood in my kitchen. I found it out later, from an attorney who read the probate filing Thomas submitted 9 days after the CPS report. A filing that referenced, by name, an active investigation into the executor's fitness as a caregiver. He didn't report me because he thought I was neglecting Eli. He reported me because a caseworker's file with my name on it was worth more to him than the truth was. My mother knew what he was planning to file in probate court. She told me later that she'd known for 3 weeks. She did not warn me. She said she didn't think it would actually go anywhere, which is the kind of sentence people say when they've decided in advance whose side they're on, and don't want to admit it out loud. The stakes were not abstract. If the CPS finding went the wrong way, even temporarily, Thomas's filing had language ready to request emergency oversight of the trust, oversight that would have frozen every account, delayed every disbursement, and put a stranger's signature on decisions about my father's estate and, indirectly, about my son's future. His name was on the trust document as a beneficiary, and so was mine. There was a fifth incident I didn't count at the time, because I didn't want to. 2 years ago, when Eli was 4, Thomas showed up to his birthday party 40 minutes late, no gift, and spent most of the afternoon on his phone in my backyard. When I mentioned it to him afterward, gently, he told me I was keeping score, a phrase he used often enough that I started to believe it about myself. I stopped mentioning things after that. I told myself it was generosity. I understand now it was training. He was teaching me, one small dismissal at a time, that raising a concern about his behavior made me the problem, not him. Our mother, Rosa Reyes, has a way of describing Thomas that I used to find endearing and now recognize as a kind of quiet erasure. He's sensitive, she'd say, whenever he skipped something, forgot something, said something sharp. She never used that word for me. When I missed a family dinner because I was on call for an emergency placement, a 6-year-old removed from a home at 11 at night, she told my aunt I'd chosen work over family. The same sentence, almost the same syllables, Thomas would later put into a stranger's mouth and mail to a state agency. I didn't see the shape of it until I had to. That's the thing about a pattern built by someone who loves plausible deniability. Each individual piece looks small enough to forgive. It's only when you lay them end to end, the way I eventually laid mine end to end in a navy blue folder, that you see the whole shape was always pointed at the same target. The investigation moved fast, the way they're required to when a child's safety is the stated concern. Carol Ibarra scheduled a follow-up home visit for that Friday, 3 days after the first one. In between, I did something I don't recommend to most of the parents I work with, because most of them don't have the training for it. I pulled the statute. Alden County operates under the same reporting framework as the county I work in, and I know that framework the way other people know their own street address. A report made with knowledge that the allegation is false, or made with reckless disregard for its truth, is itself a chargeable offense in this state. Not a formality, a crime, with a filing process, a burden of proof, and a form. I called Thomas on Thursday night. Not to accuse him yet, because I still did not have proof, only a timeline that felt too precise to be coincidence. I asked him, plainly, whether he had anything to do with a report filed against me. "Why would I do that?" he said. "Maybe you should ask yourself why someone thought there was a problem in the first place." I want you to notice what he didn't say. He didn't say no. "I'm not asking you to guess," I said. "I'm asking you directly. You always think everything's about you," he said. "Maybe somebody's just worried about Eli. Did you ever think of that?" I sat with the phone against my ear for a long moment before I answered. My hand had gone cold around it. "Say his name again," I told him, "and mean it this time." He hung up. Here is the moment I stopped being someone who managed my brother's moods for the sake of family peace. I had spent years absorbing his comments, his absences, his small cruelties, because our mother had a phrase for it. That's just Tommy. I decided, standing in my kitchen with a dead phone line in my hand, that I was done translating his behavior into something forgivable. Carol arrived Friday at 4 p.m. She walked through the house again. She asked Eli, gently, age-appropriate questions, the kind I've asked 100 children myself. "Do you feel safe at home? Does your mom feed you? Is there anything that scares you?" Eli, in his dinosaur pajamas, told her his mom made him waffles that morning, and that the only thing that scared him was the thunder from Tuesday. Carol closed her notebook. She told me, carefully, that nothing in either visit supported the allegations, and that she would be recommending the case be closed as unfounded. Then she told me something else, something I don't think she was required to share, but did anyway, one professional to another. "The referral source line is unusually specific for an anonymous tip," she said. "It named financial details about you that most anonymous reporters wouldn't have. If I were you, I'd request the unsealing once this closes. Bad faith referrals get treated differently." That was the retention hook I didn't know I needed. A stranger, Someone with no reason to help me beyond professional decency had just told me the door I needed was about to open. Before Carol left that Friday, she paused at the door and said one more thing, almost as an afterthought, though I don't think anything Carol Ibarra said was ever really an afterthought. "For what it's worth," she said, "I've done this job 12 years. Most anonymous reports read like someone's worried. This one read like someone's angry." She didn't wait for me to respond. She just walked to her car, and I stood in the doorway with that sentence sitting in my chest like a stone I hadn't asked for and now couldn't put down. I called Thomas a second time that weekend, not to accuse him again, but because some part of me still wanted to be wrong. I asked him directly whether he'd known the case had already been found unfounded when he filed anything referencing it. There was a pause on the line long enough that I counted it, 4 seconds. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "I haven't told you it's closed yet," I said. "I haven't told anyone that." The line went quiet again. Then he said, "Look, I was just trying to protect the estate. Dad wanted things done right. If you'd stepped back and let someone else handle it, none of this would have happened." There it was. Not a denial, a justification. He wasn't protecting Eli. He'd never once asked how Eli was doing since Carol's first visit. He was protecting a filing. "You used my son," I said, "to get a title on a piece of paper. That's not fair," he said. "No," I said, "it isn't. That's the point." I did not tell Thomas what Carol said. I did not call my mother to vent, or ask Eli what he remembered about the visit, because I have watched what repeated questioning does to a child who has already been through enough. I made him waffles again on Saturday, the real kind, not the frozen kind, and I did not mention Carol's name or Thomas's name once in front of him. What I did instead was call Renata Ford. Renata Ford is a family law attorney, and she has been my friend since our first year of graduate school, back when we were both 23, and certain we'd fix the world one case file at a time. She did not fix this for me. She told me, over coffee, exactly what she'd tell any client. "You know this process better than I do. I'm here to make sure you don't miss a form, not to run it for you." That was the kind of ally I needed, not someone to carry it, someone to check my work. The case closed as unfounded 11 days after it opened. Alden County sent formal written notice. That single document, 4 paragraphs long, on county letterhead, became the foundation for everything after it. I filed for the unsealing of the referral source the same week, using the exact statute Carol had pointed me toward. The request took 18 days to process. When it came back, the name on the line was Thomas Reyes. Consent had never been given for anyone to use my son as leverage in a fight over money, and I made sure that word, consent, appeared in every filing I submitted from that point forward, because it was the truest word I had for what he'd taken from me without asking. I did not stop at the unsealing. I requested the full case file under the state's public records provision for closed, unfounded reports involving the accused parent, a right most people don't know they have. I built a folder, not metaphorically, an actual navy blue folder, the same kind I hand to families in my own job, and inside it went the closure letter, the unsealing order, a timeline I built hour by hour of the day of my promotion, and a printout of the probate filing Thomas had submitted 9 days after the CPS report, the one that cited an active investigation that, by the time he filed it, he already knew had closed as unfounded. That last detail mattered more than anything else in the folder. He hadn't just filed a false report. He had continued to reference it in a separate legal proceeding after he knew it was false, which moved what he'd done from a bad faith referral into something closer to fraud on the probate court. Renata reviewed every page. She flagged one gap, a text message Thomas had sent our mother the day before the report, one my mother eventually admitted to having, and, after some pressure from her own conscience rather than from me, forwarded. It read, in part, that he was about to make sure Danielle's promotion doesn't mean what she thinks it means. I read that message 4 times before I understood what it actually meant. Not that he knew about the promotion in advance, a fact that on its own would have been strange enough. It meant he had been waiting for something to celebrate, specifically, so he could time the report to land in the same breath as the good news. This wasn't opportunism. It was planning. My brother had built a plan around my happiness the way other people build plans around a vacation. I did not cry reading it, though I want to be honest that I expected to. What I felt instead was the same cold clarity I feel in the field, the moment a case file stops being confusing and starts being a straight line. I photographed the message, dated it, added it to the folder behind a tab labeled, in my own handwriting, intent. 22 minutes before the report. A text with intent, sent the night before. Thomas believed, I think, that I would fold the way I always had, that I'd call him, cry, ask him why, beg for an explanation that would let us both pretend this was a misunderstanding. He believed the sister who'd spent 9 years smoothing over his behavior for the sake of a peaceful Thanksgiving table would do the same thing here. He was wrong about this version of me, and he let his own certainty do most of my work for me. He never asked whether I was building a file. He assumed I was too busy grieving to notice what he'd done. I filed 3 things within the same week. A bad faith referral complaint with the State Oversight Board, supported by the closure letter, the unsealing order, and the text message. A formal objection to Thomas's probate petition, supported by the same evidence, filed by Renata on my behalf as executor, and a request to the court that any future filings referencing my fitness as a parent be accompanied by the underlying record, so no one could cite an investigation again without the finished result attached. Renata had one more instruction before we filed anything. Don't send him a single word about what you're building, she said. Not a hint. Let the filings be the first thing he hears from you. I followed that instruction exactly. For 18 days, while the unsealing request processed, I answered his texts about ordinary things, a cousin's baby shower, whether I'd be at Sunday dinner, in the same flat, cordial tone I'd used with him for years. He had no idea the folder existed. He believed, right up until the moment the certified letters went out, that I was still the sister who absorbed things quietly. I photographed every page before it went into the folder, then scanned the originals a second time at Renata's office, so 2 complete copies existed in 2 separate locations neither of us controlled alone. I built a single-page timeline, printed and taped to the inside cover, that laid out every date in order. February, our father's death. March, the $12,000 disbursement. The Tuesday of my promotion, 8:40 a.m. The report, 9:02 a.m. The text to our mother the night before, time-stamped 11:14 p.m. 9 days later, the probate filing. 11 days after that, the closure letter. 18 days after that, the unsealing order with his name on it. Laid out that way, in a single column, the story told itself. Nobody reading that page needed me to explain a single sentence of it out loud. Documentation, I have learned in 9 years of this work and 1 very long month of my own life, does not shout. It sits quietly in a folder until the exact moment someone needs it to speak for you. The Oversight Board's response came back in 6 weeks, faster than most, because Renata had flagged it as involving a mandated reporter's family member, which triggers priority review. The findings stated that the report against me had been made by a person with a documented financial interest adverse to mine, using information not reasonably available to a genuine anonymous tipster, and recommended referral to the county attorney for review of the false reporting statute. Thomas was contacted first by phone, then by certified letter. My mother told me, 3 days after the letter arrived, that he had not slept, that he'd called her at midnight asking whether she thought he needed a criminal attorney. I did not feel the satisfaction I expected to feel. I felt something quieter, something closer to the exhale you take after holding your breath longer than you meant to. The probate court ruled on his objection the following month. The judge's language was direct. The petition to remove me as executor was denied, and the court noted, with concern, that the petitioner had continued to reference an investigation in his filings after receiving, by his own admission during discovery, informal knowledge that it had closed as unfounded. The court ordered Thomas to bear the legal costs of the objection proceeding, a little over $9,000, paid not from the trust, but from his own share of the estate. Word moved through the family the way it always does, sideways, through people who weren't supposed to be the ones telling it. My aunt called me, not Thomas. My cousin sent a text that just said, I heard, "I'm sorry." My mother said the least of anyone, which told me everything I needed to know about the 3 weeks she'd spent knowing what he was planning and saying nothing. The bank's compliance department, I learned later, had its own reason to move quickly once the diversion agreement showed up in his file. A finding involving fraud on a court proceeding, even a family court, even resolved through diversion, sits differently for someone whose job involves approving other people's loan applications and vouching for their creditworthiness. Thomas had spent his career deciding, on paper, whether strangers deserved trust. Now a piece of paper was deciding the same thing about him. Thomas did not go to prison. I want to be honest about that, because this isn't a story about ruin. It's a story about consequences arriving in the size they were meant to arrive in. The county attorney's office, after review, offered a pretrial diversion agreement, an admission of the false reporting violation, a fine, 40 hours of community service, and a formal restriction preventing him from filing future CPS referrals in the county without independent review. He accepted it rather than risk a trial. His employer, a regional bank where he managed a small commercial lending team, placed him on a performance improvement plan after the diversion agreement became part of a routine background recheck, standard for anyone in his role. He was not fired. He was, for the first time in his adult life, being watched the way he'd tried to have me watched. I did not call to gloat. I did not post anything. I did not tell Eli any part of what had happened to his uncle, because Eli's world stayed exactly the size it needed to stay. Waffles, dinosaurs, thunder, school on Mondays. That was the version of revenge nobody warns you is available to you. Not a scene, not a confrontation in a driveway, just the quiet, total absence of explaining myself to people who were never owed an explanation in the first place. The diversion agreement required Thomas to complete his 40 hours of community service at a food bank 40 minutes from his house, a detail my aunt mentioned to me almost gleefully, as if she needed permission to find some small piece of it funny. I didn't laugh. I felt something closer to relief, that the system I have spent 9 years believing in, imperfect as it is, had actually done what it was built to do when someone tried to use it as a weapon instead of a shield. Carla, Thomas's wife, called me twice that month. The first call, she defended him, told me I was destroying the family over money. The second call, 3 weeks later, she asked me quietly whether I thought he needed to talk to someone, a therapist, because she'd started to see things in him she said she'd been ignoring for years. I told her I couldn't answer that for her. I could only tell her what I'd learned about patterns, and that noticing one is the first thing, not the only thing. My mother asked me, a few weeks later, if I could let it go, for the family. I told her I already had. I just wasn't going to pretend it hadn't happened, in order to make the next holiday easier for everyone else. She didn't have a response to that. For the first time in longer than I can remember, neither of us tried to fill the silence. The trust distributed on schedule, 7 months after our father passed, exactly as he'd written it, with me still named as executor, and Thomas still receiving his equal half, because our father's wishes for the money were never the thing in question. Only Thomas's judgment had been. I sat in my father's empty house the day the final disbursement cleared, the house we'd both grown up in, the one the trust was about to sell. I thought about the barbecue in 2022, and the hospital room 3 weeks before he died, and the 2 times Thomas had asked to be the one in charge. I understood, sitting there, that my father had seen this coming in some smaller form, years before any of us did. He hadn't picked me because I was better loved. He'd picked me because he knew which of us would still be standing, calm and documented, on the other side of whatever Thomas eventually tried. I kept my promotion. I run a unit now that reviews exactly the kind of cases that were once opened against me. And I sit across from parents some days who are living through the version of the week I lived through, except most of them don't know the statute number for their own defense the way I did. I tell them what Carol Ibarra told me, unprompted, because someone told it to me first. Ask about the referral source. Ask about unsealing. Documentation does not shout, but it waits, and it will speak for you exactly when you need it to. Eli is 7 now. He does not remember Carol Ibarra's name, or the visit, or the folder his mother built in the months after. He remembers the waffles. He remembers that his mother was there every single Friday to pick him up, the way she'd promised, the way she still does. I did not win anything, in the sense people usually mean when they use that word about family. I did not get an apology. I did not get my brother back. Not really. Not the version I'd told myself existed for 30 years, despite a decade of small evidence to the contrary. What I got was clarity. I stopped explaining myself to someone who had already decided, before I ever opened my mouth, what story he was going to tell about me. That stillness is the only kind of winning this story has room for. I still see Thomas at family events, twice a year now instead of every month. We are polite. We do not discuss the diversion agreement or the fine or the 40 hours at the food bank, and I don't bring it up, because bringing it up would mean I was still trying to make him understand something he has shown me. Repeatedly, he isn't interested in understanding. I stopped needing him to understand it. That's a different kind of freedom than the one people expect this story to end on. Quieter, less satisfying to imagine, but it's the one that actually lasted. I think about the 22 minutes sometimes. Still. Not with the same charge it used to carry, just as a fact now, a data point in a timeline I know by heart, the way I know the statute number I pulled that Thursday night, the way I know exactly which form unseals a referral source when someone tries to make an anonymous accusation, do a job the truth never could. My mother and I are better now than we were during those weeks, though we've never spoken directly about the 3 weeks she knew and said nothing. Some repairs don't need a conversation. They need time, and consistency, and the small daily proof that I was never the danger anyone tried to make me out to be. If you are the one your family has always counted on to stay quiet, to smooth things over, to assume the best of someone who has shown you, again and again, exactly who they are, I need you to hear this. You are allowed to stop translating cruelty into misunderstanding. You are allowed to build the folder. You are allowed to let the consequence belong to the person who earned it, instead of carrying it for them the way you've carried everything else. People ask me sometimes, when they learn the shorthand version of this story, whether I regret filing the bad faith complaint, whether it would have been easier to let it go quietly for the sake of family dinners and holiday photos. I don't regret it. Easier was never the same thing as right, and I had spent 30 years mistaking one for the other where Thomas was concerned. If your own sibling used the safety of your child as a bargaining chip in a fight over money, would you have reported him the way I did, or would you have stayed silent to protect what was left of the family? Tell me what you would have done, and tell me where you're watching from. This story is completely fictional, created for entertainment and reflection, and no real people, agencies, or events are depicted. If any part of it felt familiar, that recognition belongs to you, and it matters more than anything that happened in this script.